Hmm. So how can you fix yourself? Is it possible, Mark?
I absolutely believe it is possible to recover. I think the word is recover.
Mm-hmm.
Fix can be a dangerous word because, of course, in the world of addiction, people turn to drugs and alcohol to get a fix.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not use the word fix. Let's use the word recover. And recovery from any addiction, I think the most, one of the most important things to really understand is what does recovery mean when used in this term? Well, the word recovery to me means to rediscover something that has been lost. And so when used, when applied to a human being, to me, it has meant over the last few years, rediscovering me, the me that was born 53 years ago, innocent, vulnerable, fragile, and deserving of love. Every baby that's ever born is born a bundle of joy. Every time you look at a baby, the baby smiles at you, it makes gorgeous noises. You look at this beautiful creature and you see this light, this curiosity. All babies want to do is look and be curious and touch and love. That's all they want to do. And they have every right to deserve that love in return.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When it doesn't come, of course, that's when problems go wrong. And that's when children start to hide themselves because they're too frightened to show their true self. So to me, that's where the problems start. And then as those problems get deeper and deeper, and then you grow up into your teenage years and you have not learned how to show your feelings and emotions, as I was saying earlier, that's when addictions come in, because they medicate the difficulty that you're having with your feelings. So for me, recovery is about learning to express and feel your feelings, and realize that just because your feelings when you were a baby or when you were a child were genuinely terrifying because of what may have been done to you, those same feelings do not have to control your adult life. The problem is, until someone points that out to you, we as human beings, we have these ingrained patterns, defensive patterns, things we've learned to do over many years, decades in my case. And they're very hard to break until someone sits you down and helps you see that what you learned to defend yourself against as a child, you no longer have to defend yourself against as an adult, despite the fact your brain at times is telling you so. So to me, recovery is about rediscovering the true essence, the true nature of yourself, and realizing that it is finally safe to show yourself, to express yourself, to have your feelings, to feel your feelings, to show your emotions, to be seen and to be heard, and hopefully with someone in your adult life who is able to reciprocate that.
Mm. I often came across people at work who hate this vulnerable part of themselves. So when they come closer, a little bit closer to themselves, they immediately build up this defense wall because they have so much hatred to this part. I don't know whether you experienced that, or can you say how can one deal with this hatred toward themselves?
What a beautiful question. Thank you. Self-hatred is something that has driven me tragically for most of my life. When a child is being abused in any way by its parents, it does not learn to hate its parents. It learns to hate itself, because a child has no other possible alternative than to tell itself, than to believe that whatever a parent is screaming at the child for, it must be the child's fault. Because a child doesn't have the ability to rationalize and say, age 5, for example, oh, mummy is just having a bad day. That's not what a child does. It learns to hate itself. And in a family like that, you cannot be vulnerable, because if you show a soft or vulnerable side, it will be humiliated or beaten or attacked or laughed at or ridiculed. This is what happens in dysfunctional families with parents who are themselves in a lot of pain. Unfortunately, society forgets very easily that when you see a child behaving badly, or when you see a bully on a playground attacking another child, society tends to look at the child and say, oh, what a bad kid. But hang on a second. No 7-year-old goes onto a playground and physically attacks another 7 or a 6 or a 5-year-old for no reason. There must be a reason. And that's where we need to look. And unfortunately, the reason is not the child's fault, it's the parent's fault. No one is born a bully. No one. No one is born homophobic. No one is born racist. You have to learn these things from someone. And of course, most of the time, you learn these from your parents. You learn whatever they hate, whatever they don't like. You inherit that. It becomes your norm until you learn to question it. But that may be some years down the line, and you may never learn to question it. And that's the problem with our society. And that leads us to not be vulnerable. And men are taught you can't cry, you can't be weak. To ask for help is weakness. You must do it on your own. I mean, let's not forget, Natalia, your country and mine were at the heart of 2 world wars. I mean, that actually still is worth mentioning, because it taught generations of men to be tough, to not be seen to be weak in any way, because otherwise that weakness would be exploited. Well, of course, today, luckily, and pray it never happens again, we're not fighting a world war. We're actually getting up out of bed and going to work and trying to run our life and trying to make money and trying to love and be loved and trying to have a relationship with our wives and our children and pets or whatever you want to have a relationship with. But we have this legacy left over from the last 100 years of men being taught that it is not acceptable to cry. You mustn't show your feelings. If you show your feelings, or if you're too gentle, or if you're too feminine, you're not a man. You've got to be a man. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be a man. That is the problem. That's where the problems start, when a father turns to a young boy and says, stop crying and be a man. Why? What's wrong with crying? What's wrong with having feelings and emotions? This is the problem. So yes, we learn to hate ourselves if we fear vulnerability. There's an amazing woman in America who I'm sure you've heard of, called Brené Brown.
Yes, I have.
She first released her now, it's been watched millions of times. There's a YouTube TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability. If you type Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability into YouTube, you will find it. It's a 20-minute TED Talk. It is absolutely brilliant. It so destroys the myths, the poisoned myths around the fact that weakness, that vulnerability is weakness. Vulnerability is strength. If you have the courage to turn to a fellow human being that you trust and say, I am struggling, I need help, what do you think of this? You automatically give the person you've turned to permission to show their softer side. And so automatically, you actually end up having a much deeper and much more genuine conversation. It's only when you it's only when you posture and all this modern rubbish of trying to hide your emotions that people sense it, and they see that you're distant and you're defensive. Well, no one wants to get close to someone that's defensive. It's not natural. You want to talk to someone if you feel that they're open and vulnerable. So the vulnerability thing is huge. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And I lived hating parts of myself, big parts of myself, for decades. I believe I have finally figured out that there's no point in hating parts of myself. When I have clients who have this very problem, and a lot of them do, I ask them this question. I say, if you're in the kitchen and you're using a knife and you cut your finger, what do you do with your finger? And automatically they say, well, you bandage it and you take care of it. And I say, exactly. You don't cut it off, do you? You can't cut off bits of yourself that get damaged. You have to help them repair. So we do that so naturally with our physical bodies. But why don't we do that with our emotional selves? So when we have a part of ourselves that we don't like, we try and ban it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to feel it. But why not? Because if we nurture ourself, our internal self, as easily and as obviously as we nurture a cut finger, we would all be a lot healthier.
Beautiful.